arrangement in some cases where the state land, you're good to go, but private property, you cannot walk on them in the summer, but you could use a snowmobile trail in the winter. To find maps of the snowmobile trails, some hiking trails are actually used as snowmobile trails in the winter. So that's especially popular in southern Hamilton County. You have snowmobile trails on these trails in the winter, and then in the summer, you can hike, mountain bike, do whatever you want on them. Not all are portrayed on hiking trails, nor are they portrayed on topographic maps. So that's where I had to use all three: a topographic map, a hiking map, probably combined with a guidebook, and then on top of that, a New York State snowmobile trail map to try to figure out exactly where these things are in the woods. It was quite confusing in the beginning.
Sure, it's a lot of homework too that you had to do, which is good. Obviously you're going back there by yourself. You need to be doing all the homework possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we have now is a 240-mile route, and 239.5 are on state land. There's a small section of private land about the halfway point where I have a handshake agreement with the landowner. But
Cool.
that's what I really wanted to do, is to ensure that it's open to the public. It will stay open to the public. I'm aware of stories in the past where a trail may traverse a piece of private land, the landowner dies, let's say their son inherits the land and he's not a big fan of hikers. And so they lose that access.
That makes sense. So you have a book, Blue Line to Blue Line, which is a guidebook for doing this route specifically.
Right. So to hike the route, what you'll need are two things. Well, three. One, you need a little bit of luck, and you also need the guidebook, Blue Line to Blue Line, and then there's a map set that matches up with the guidebook. So the guidebook, it really gives all information you would possibly need for a through hike, not just the directions, turn left here, turn right there, cross this stream, just standard guidebook fare. But there's also stuff on Adirondack history and Adirondack place names and lightweight backpacking and stuff like that. It's kind of an all-encompassing user's guide to the route.
Perfect. Now, in case people listening want to know, it is 188 miles of trail hiking, 39 miles of road walking, and 11.2 miles of off-trail travel. So this route has a 56% success rate according to your website. So take me through. That's a very low success rate. Although I guess in comparison to things like the Appalachian Trail, which is like 15% success rate, something like that. Isn't it like 15 hikers for every 100 that start actually finish? So
yeah,
what causes that 56% success rate? If I were a betting man, I'm guessing it's the 11.2 miles of off-trail travel would probably be what sends people home, due to, I would just have to assume that is going through some thick areas. But I could be completely wrong. So in your mind, what makes it so challenging specifically?
Well, you would win that bet.
Great. I had a feeling.
Yeah, the off-trail sections can get gnarly, and we could talk about those in a sec. And I was laughing when you said, "Oh, why don't people finish this thing?" When a prospective thru hiker doesn't finish, I usually say to my friends, oh my God, see, they didn't listen again. So there are certain clear pieces of advice that I give in Blue Line to Blue Line, and I give to any prospective thru hiker who contacts me beforehand. And I've had quite a few contact me and say, "Hey, I hear this thing's pretty difficult. Can we talk about it a little?" I go, "Oh, yeah, sure." There are two specific groups of people who don't finish the TransADK route. And there's really not a group in between these two. One is a group of highly successful hikers. So, for example, we've had 3 Triple Crown hikers not be able to finish the route. And a Triple Crown hiker is somebody who has through hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, Continental Divide Trail, and the Appalachian Trail. That's 8,000 miles of hiking. And yet they couldn't finish a 240-mile route. Well, why is that? They simply took it too lightly. They said, especially if they're from out west, they say, oh my God, 240 miles and it hovers around 2,000 feet elevation. Oh my goodness gracious, this is going to be easy. And then they get out there and they say, wow, this is a lot tougher than I thought. The other population, maybe they've hiked the Northville Placid Trail, maybe they've hiked the Adirondack 46, and they say, well, the Trans-Adirondack route, it's only 100 miles tougher than the Northville Placid Trail, and that thing wasn't that tough. And then again, they get out there and they say, wow, this is more difficult than I thought. So it's those two groups. We've also had through hikers start too early. So I've had at least 2 through hikers start in April. And I said, hey, man,
Mm-hmm.
you have to go over Whiteface. And
Yeah.
it's almost 5,000 feet. It's way up north, and there's going to be too much snow. And that's exactly what happened. We've also had a couple of through hikers, at least one, try it in November. And again, I said, look, dude,
Winter's coming. It's probably
you
winter
gotta
already. Yeah.
get over Whiteface as fast as you can and get through the high peaks. And they kind of dilly dallied in the beginning, and before they knew it, there was 10 inches of snow on Whiteface.
Yeah, that sounds about right for that time of year. I mean, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
even at that, you start in November. I mean, you already will see the snow on Whiteface just from driving around literally anywhere. So you kind of know what you're in store for at that point.
Right. And those are what I would call in between months. I mean, I've hiked in November, it was 60. I've hiked in April, it was no snow, but you can't really bet on good conditions. Getting back to the off trail sections, again, if you're a pure trail hiker, so if you've hiked the Triple Crown and you've hiked 8,000 miles, there's a very good chance you've never bushwhacked in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've met hikers who have hiked 15,000 miles. They've never traveled off trail. And as you probably know, boy, that's a tight learning curve. If you have never done it before and now you're on your first off trail section, let's say it's 2.5 miles, you have a map and a compass, maybe a GPS, and you can't see your destination. I mean, I could rarely see my destination when I bushwhack in the Adirondacks. You get a half mile in, a mile in. Now everything looks the same. You're not sure where you started. You're not entirely clear where you're headed, and it can be an overwhelming feeling.
Sure. There's a lot working against you in those moments.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I could definitely imagine being someone who's used to walking on a trail, and then you get outside and you're bushwhacking, and to have to go a mile alone through thick, thick brush would be, right off the bat, man, I have 10 more miles of this throughout this trip. Yikes. I could see that being a deter to send someone home quickly.
Right, right. And the sections are short. You've got a quarter mile here, half mile there. I think the longest is maybe 2 miles. For a guy like me, it's no big deal.
Sure.
2 miles, I'll just bang it out in 90 minutes and I'm done. But, imagine if you're from out west, most of your experience is on manicured trails. You get out there and it can get hairy, and when you mentioned, uh, you know, being off trail, there are a lot going against you. It reminds me of this absolutely fascinating story. Uh, this was maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. There was a woman hiking the Appalachian Trail. She was up in Maine. She left the trail to go to the bathroom. She got turned around, and she was so overwhelmed with being off trail that she died. She stayed off trail and just hoped that somebody would find her. And she actually starved to death. And she was missing, I think, for about a year. And a timber cruiser stumbled upon her corpse. She was a quarter mile from the AT.
Wow. Yikes.
Quarter mile. But, a quarter mile, look, I've bushwhacked a lot in Maine. A quarter mile off the AT in Maine, you don't know if you're 10 miles off the trail.
Sure.
And that's a perfect example of where, if you're used to trail hiking and not used to bushwhacking, things can go downhill rather rapidly.
So now let's talk some positive. Let's get positive now. So you have 56% success rate, which means you're over the hump. So more people finish than don't. What do the people
Yeah.
who finish the trail kind of what's their so they hike the trail? I imagine you talk to them after. What do they tell you? What's their their conclusions of the trail, or what's their experience been like, and what they've said to you?
Well, I remember I through hiked it and of course established it, and then I came out with a guidebook, and I had two sisters, and then one of the sisters' boyfriend contact me, and they said, "Hey, we're going to through hike this thing." They were fresh off the Appalachian Trail. They had hiked it that summer. And I said, "Yeah, this would be great. You're going to be really the first ones, not counting me." They're all excited. They went out and they through hiked it. And I said, "What did you think?" And they offered a 2-word response. And their answer was, "It's wild." That's it. That's
That's
all
it.
they had to say. And I probably had a big smile on my face because that's exactly the theme of the route.
Sure.
And they were like, "Yeah, it was just crazy. We were out in these wilderness areas and we did some bushwhacking. We had never done that before. And we're camping pristinely and, maybe not staying in lean-tos every night. And there were only 2 or 3 resupply points." And they say, "That's a lot different than the Appalachian Trail." And they go, "We got a kick out of it when somebody said, 'Oh, where are you going?' And they said, 'Oh, we're hiking the TransADK route.' And everybody's like, 'Never heard of it.'
Hmm.
No,
Sure.
I have no idea what that thing is." So the through hikers that I've talked to, they like the wild side of it. The other response that sticks out is they're hiking in parts of the park, just like me, they had never heard of, let alone hiked in. I mean, when's the last time when a friend of yours goes hiking and you say, "Where are you going hiking this weekend?" You've probably never heard the response, Ellenberg Center. It doesn't happen. Town of Stratford. It just doesn't happen.
Sure.
They're going to the high peaks and they're going up, fire tower peaks and stuff like that. So people like the primitive nature of the route, and they like that it's taking them uh, places they have never been before.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. Now, if you guys do decide to go after the TransADK route, the moral of the story is to buy the book Blue Line to Blue Line and listen to the words inside of the book. That is what we need to get across here. That is your answer
That
to success.
that is some good advice. Yeah, it's all spelled out there. And I always extend this invitation to prospective through hikers. I love when people contact me beforehand and say, "Hey, I'm not really familiar with this neck of the woods," or, "Hey, is this resupply point still open?" I love talking to prospective through hikers because I want everybody who sets out on this to succeed. So I'll do everything I can to help them.
Sure, sure. Now, you guys, within the world of the transadk.com, there's another challenge of sorts, if you want to call it that you guys have, that you've created, which is to hike every foot trail within the High Peaks Wilderness area. So tell
Right?
me about that, and why did you guys start that? Tell me about the statistics from that challenge, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. Well, if you thought the Adirondack route was hard, this is a pretty tough challenge. So there are about 270 miles in High Peaks Wilderness area. Now it's interesting, High Peaks Wilderness area doesn't even exist anymore. It was combined with the Dix Mountain Wilderness area and some other parcels to create High Peaks Wilderness Complex, which now exceeds 200,000 acres. But we're going old school here. We're using the traditional language and the traditional trail system of High Peaks Wilderness area. So if you can manage, if you can hike every mile of trail, which is about 270 miles, you can get a patch and a completer certificate. Now, I have not had to mail many of these out because there are 2 people who have ever done it, and
You're one of them.
I'm one of them.
Great.
So it's very tough. So the other gentleman that finished got in touch with